So I was a little stingy with this guy this morning because that we're talking about, it's Jason Lee on your bulletin if you're wondering. I grew up in Oregon. I was born in Oregon. My mother still claims I'm Oregonian, and I'm not. Even though I was born there, I only lived there from age 8 to 12. And because of the way the school system does their state history, every state does it different, they did state history in 8th grade, so I missed it. And then I moved to Idaho in junior high, and they did it in the 4th grade, so I missed it there too. I didn't get any of that state history. But I've always had, like in a couple of weeks, I'm going to talk about somebody else that was a little bit more familiar with growing up. So I kind of have a heart, I guess, for like Lewis and Clark, their explorations, because they were the first ones to go all the way out west. And also the Oregon Trail, because I actually had I don't know if it was a great-great-grandmother or great-grandmother, I don't remember, I didn't look it up, that actually went from Minnesota to Oregon on the Oregon Trail. So it's got a little place in my heart. My mom is still there. But this week, we are talking about a guy named Jason Lee, who was very important to the state of Oregon, and it's kind of cool to me, and why I'm having so much fun with this series is learning about these people from history. I heard somebody saying, I don't remember who it was, that everybody is interesting. If we would just learn other people's stories, we see these names, you see these names in the bulletin, and they're just names and dates, but if you dig into the stories or hear stories from other people, it's like everybody is interesting. Everyone has a story, and some people have such a big story that the effects go on for almost 200 years now coming up. So I discovered that this man, Jason Lee, was a Methodist preacher who answered a call that took him from the Northeast. He was actually born in Canada to American parents. But it took him from the Northeast all the way to the Willamette Valley in Oregon, which is Portland area, in the 1830s. He was converted to Christ at a revival service, because that's what was happening at the time, these Methodist and Presbyterian revivals all over the place, when he was 23. And at that time, he felt the call of God to do the work of God. And others said of him that he was a man of deep faith, and he also had a heart for missionary work that no doubt that God gave to him. But unlike Harriet Livermore that I talked about a few weeks ago, who kind of went out on her own, bouncing around to different groups of people, he didn't decide to pack up his stuff and just say, hey, I'm just going to go to Oregon and go out on his own. But he was sent by God through the Methodist Missionary Society because there was a need for Christian missionaries, they felt, to go out to the West. Because this is an interesting story, too. There was a couple of groups of Indians from Washington and the Idaho area that traveled to Missouri, to St. Louis, to speak to the Indian agent who was William Clark. I think that was right. Anyway, they wanted the white man's book of heaven. So God had been working in the Indians up there in the Northwest, and news of these Indians coming to St. Louis looking for the scriptures and wanting to know more about this white man's God. The story was interesting, and it went through the other Christian publications and that, and so the Methodist Missionary Society is like, okay, this is a call, this is a need that we have, so we're going to find someone to go. And that man ended up being Jason Lee. The church confirmed his calling to be a missionary, and they commissioned him he took some others, he didn't go by himself, and he went and he established the first Protestant mission in the Pacific Northwest. And this is an interesting tidbit. Later on, the Mission Society sent some other people because he needed help, and they sent a single woman that they thought would be a good wife, and they were the first white couple to get married in the Pacific Northwest. I just thought that was interesting. But anyway, he went on and founded what became Willamette University. And this is a really cool part, too, is he helped lay the groundwork for Oregon to become a part of the United States. And he went back to Washington a couple of times and fought for even just taking over the territory, making it a U.S. territory. So he was one man sent by the church under the Spirit's direction, and the ripple effects are still felt today. I'm not sure what he'd think about Oregon, that Portland area today, but he helped blaze the trail and the Oregon Trail and the white settlement to Oregon at that time. But this is what's happening in Acts 13, which is our text for this morning. It says, now there were in the church at Antioch, and this is a place where some guys from other places came and were telling the people about Jesus, and the word got to Jerusalem that this was happening. And so the Jerusalem church, they sent Barnabas to Antioch to see what was going on. And he goes and he is with these people and sees that they're learning about Jesus, and he goes to Tarsus and gets Saul and then comes back to Antioch. And they've been with the Antioch church for about a year teaching them. So Antioch church has these prophets and teachers. Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. And while they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. Then after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off. So being sent out by the Holy Spirit, they went down to Seleucia, and from there they sailed to Cyprus. So that's what's happening in this church. They're just praying and they're worshiping. They're not coming up with a strategic plan. They don't have a capital campaign going. They're just doing their thing of learning and worshiping and fasting together. And in the midst of this, the Holy Spirit interrupts their routine with this command to set apart Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I've called them. And like he has done so many other times, God does not specify exactly what that work will be, but that he has a specific work for Saul and Barnabas that he is calling them to. And their job is to say yes and to go. But listen who is listed here. Barnabas, he was a Levite, part of the priestly tribe of the Israelites. He's from Cyprus. He's from Greek. He was generous. He was trusted. He was full of the Holy Spirit and devoted to God. Simeon, called Niger, was likely of African descent and is a reminder that the gospel always crosses ethnic lines. Lucius of Cyrene, he's from North Africa also, and Manaen, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, was raised in the palace. He was a foster brother of Herod the Tetrarch, a man of privilege who chose faithfulness to God over comfort. And then there was Saul, who later is known as Paul, a former prosecutor of the church, now numbered among these teachers. This is not a seminary faculty. This is not a specific little Bible study group. This is a local church with diverse backgrounds, gifts, and stories. And they were just together worshiping and fasting, which is taking a time of separate concentration on God when the Spirit spoke. And this is the pattern that if we were to study more, this is what we would see in the lives of many people who were called into different ministries, is that the Holy Spirit typically doesn't call people in isolation. He speaks within the community of faith. The church is the context where the calling is confirmed, callings of all sorts, whether to missions, to preaching, to pastoring, to teaching, or to any ministry that is confirmed in the community of faith. That could be inside the local church, it could be outside the local church. When I was wrestling with my call to preach, I had an older friend at the church that when I announced it to the church, he got not too close, but close enough, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I've known that. I was just waiting for you to figure it out." So and we go through an ordination process where we're confirmed in our local churches and then on up through the larger church. And some traditions, their calling process stays within the local church, and that's okay, but the point is that it is a part of a community of faith, and it is confirmed there by the others. Well, Jason Lee didn't wake up one morning and decide he was going to be a missionary to Oregon after he was converted to Christ at that revival. He was already serving. He was already faithful in small things. He was riding circuits up in the Northeast. He was preaching in small towns. And the church recognized his gifts and his willingness. And when the call came, the community affirmed it. And when I'm studying some of these people, if I can go back to some original sources, I like to. Google Books has some really old books on there. And I found this one that was written about Jason Lee from 1896. There's just a little booklet that was written. This guy, his name was Harvey Hines. He wrote it in their conference up there for the other pastors to know about Jason Lee. And this is what he said about this process of God calling missionaries to go to Oregon. He said, when God awakens his church to such an attitude of expectancy, when the providential hour that is sure to be sounded has struck, then the providential man or woman is made ready for the work prepared. And that man, in this case, was Jason Lee. And the guy that was in charge of the Methodist Mission Board, Jason had maybe a little inside track there because they were kind of friends, so he knew Jason. But he also knew that Jason was the right person to go on this mission. So he appointed Lee for the mission of taking the Christian faith to the Indians of the Pacific Northwest. And Harvey Hines also said that this mission was thrust upon the church and instantly commanded the full confidence of the church. So it was not just Jason going off on his own, but that's how it works. That's how calling into ministry of any kind works. You prove yourself faithful in the local church first. I've heard stories, and maybe you have too, of people that get a taste of Jesus and start studying the Bible and think that right off the bat they're to go, I was one of them, to go lead Bible studies and to go preach and to think that they know it all, and they're not established and they're not faithful in the local church first, and that can be really dangerous to themselves and to others. So I think this process that is laid out here in Acts 13 is good. That we have to prove ourselves first in the local church among others who see us and can see God working in our lives. And then the Spirit uses that church to confirm where God is calling a person to serve. So the question for us is, are we listening for the Spirit's voice in the context of a Christian community, not just for ourselves, but for other people? Because some people are trying to discern a call by yourself, and you don't have to. You're praying alone, you may be wandering alone, and the call is to get back into the community, get back into the room, back into fellowship where the Spirit speaks, and not just where individuals are scattered out. So after they had fasted and prayed, they laid their hands on them and sent them off. These are 4 actions from the church that are still practiced today. They heard, they took time to concentrate, to focus on God, to pray. They laid hands on Barnabas and Saul, and then they sent. Notice the church didn't cling. They didn't say, which Barnabas might have been a really good teacher. They didn't go, well, but God, Barnabas is one of our best teachers. What are we going to do if he goes? Or Saul, what are we going to do if he goes? We can't lose our best leaders. What are we going to do? Instead, they obeyed God. The laying on of hands is significant because it is an identification, it is blessing, and it is authority. And the church was publicly saying, these men go with our full blessing. They go as representatives of this body, and we are sending them. And when Jason Lee was commissioned, the Methodist Episcopal Church was not finished with, didn't just wish him well and send him on. He sent him on a fundraising tour around the Northeast to raise some money. They prayed over him and they sent him with the authority of the denomination behind him. He wasn't a lone ranger. He took people with him. He was an extension of the church's mission and ministry. And when things got hard, which they did, because he faced starvation, opposition, and devastating personal loss, he could look back and know that he was supported by a church and a group of people that stood behind him. And when he needed more people, he knew where to go to get the help. And they sent more people and more help. But that's what commissioning does. It gives the sent person a home base of prayer and support. And it gives the sending church a stake in the mission. And I've heard of churches and been a part of churches that have been proud of their heritage of being a sending church, of having several pastors come through their congregation, of having missionaries come from their congregation. And I'm sure maybe you have as well, maybe not to faraway places or maybe to faraway places or maybe just in the community or local ministries. But here's another question for us all and our local respective local churches is, are we willing to let go of people we love because the Spirit is calling them elsewhere? Not just changing churches, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a real call from God into a ministry that takes them out of that local church. Or it could be a member stepping into missions work overseas. Or it could be local, it could be within the church. But the church that refuses to send eventually shrinks. But the church that sends, which is what Antioch was, and these others I know of, even when it costs, it grows in ways that can't be predicted. So they, being sent out by the Holy Spirit, they went down to Seleucia and then traveled on from there. But Luke makes it very clear that the Spirit, though the church sent them, the Spirit sent them. Both are true. Human commissioning and divine calling are not in competition because the Spirit works through the church. So just because you're not necessarily called to missions or pastoral or ministry or teaching or anything does not mean that as a congregant in a local church that you don't have an important role. You do. You still have a calling, and that calling is to be listening for the Spirit for those that God might be calling for a specific work. Because the Spirit works through the church, not apart from it. And Saul and Barnabas went. They didn't stall, they didn't hang around, they didn't form a committee, they didn't wait for better conditions, they didn't wait for the weather to be just right. They went. And the gospel was spread to the ends of the earth just like Jesus promised in Acts 1:8. And in 1834, which was 50 years after the Methodist Episcopal Church was officially established in America, he went. He assembled a team for support, was led. Took him over a year to get from the northeast to the Willamette Valley. He was the first one. They were the first group to go take the gospel across the Rocky Mountains. Excerpt from his journal. He was getting kind of sick of looking at the mountains because that's all he sees. Like when you see them from a distance, it's beautiful, but when you're in the middle of them and that's all you see, and you don't see anything else, and you don't know if there's anything else out there, you get kind of tired of it. It wasn't a wonderful journey, but he knew it was God ordained. And he was faithful. He didn't know the language. He didn't know what he was going to be getting into. He didn't know the terrain. He didn't know if he would survive. But he went because the Spirit called and the church sent. And some of you here listening might be sitting on a calling. Like, I don't know what that could be. But you know the Spirit has been nudging you towards something. It could be a ministry. It could be a mission. It could be just a new season of service. But you've been hesitating, and maybe you're waiting for a sign, because we do that sometimes. We get into a little superstition thing, or act like Gideon. It's like, well, Lord, if you really want me to do this, then you need to give me a sign. I'm just going to sit here and wait until you give me the right sign. Y'all heard that story of the guy, the flood, and the guy that's up on the roof? And he's praying for God for rescue. And here comes a boat. Oh, no, that's not the right one. Here comes air, And he ended up not getting off because he missed all these ways that God showed up to rescue him off that roof. Here's your sign. If the Spirit is calling and the church is confirming, then it's time to get busy. It's time to do what God is calling you to do. And it's in steps. It's a process. So you don't just jump right in. Lee he couldn't hop on a plane. He could only travel by horse across the country. Or later on, he actually went by boat or ship from Oregon all the way around South America and all the way up to New York. And we just did a cruise to Hawaii. That was 4 days on the ocean. I can't imagine months on the ocean. But he went back that way and ended up dying over there, but back in the Northeast in his hometown. But he didn't hesitate. He went. So the pattern in Acts 13 is simple, and it works for us still. The Spirit speaks within the church, but the local church has got to be worshiping and praying and fasting and together and listening together as well. And the church, the local church, is the one that sets apart for and commissions for ministry. It needs to be confirmed within the body of believers. So if you're got something on your heart and mind that you want to do, grab some other people. Don't go it alone. You're not intended to go it alone. There's others that will join you, just like Lee had others that joined him that might not necessarily have been called to missions, but they went. But the sent ones ultimately go under this authority of the Holy Spirit. So don't go out in your own authority. Go out knowing that if you know that you have this call, God is calling you to something, you go in His authority. Go on His timetable. Go according to His process. Jason Lee's story is just one example out of thousands and thousands that this pattern works in big ways with long-reaching outcomes. A local church listening to the Spirit, willing to send its best, and the gospel advances to places that no one imagined. And remember, our theme is Acts 1:8. When Jesus promised the disciples, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." And Jason Lee really went to the end of America as they knew it, which one writer said that he went as far west until it became east. You know, any further out there, then you're out back in the east. But that promise wasn't just for first century, wasn't just for them. It is for us. And this is what gets me too when I really think about it. That same Spirit that raised Jesus that filled Jesus and enabled Jesus to do all the work and the teaching that He did while He was on earth, that same Spirit that enabled Jesus to endure His passion and the crucifixion, that same Spirit that raised Him from the dead out of that tomb, that same Spirit that drew Him back to heaven at His ascension, that same Spirit that fell on the group in Acts 2 and filled them with the Spirit to where they could go and speak in other languages and share the gospel with all those in Jerusalem, the same Spirit that called Barnabas and Saul, the same one called Jason Lee and many others into ministry, is the same Spirit that is at work in our local churches and among God's people today. It's the same Spirit, the same one, calling, sending, empowering to be witnesses wherever Christ leads. Large ministry that ends up with universities and states being formed, or something as seemingly mundane and insignificant as praying with somebody who needs it in a waiting room, or praying for children in a classroom, or being Christ-like on the ball field. They're all ministry when you're living your life in a Christ-like way, because your life of faith and trust is your greatest and best witness, lived out with the support of a local church. And this is why it's important to be a part of one. And if you're not, I hope you will be. Success is not guaranteed. Lee certainly was not 100% successful in what he did. And ministry changed from what he thought it was going to be to how it ended up. Paul and Barnabas, they were not 100% successful either. We know later at the end of Acts, Paul ends up being executed in Rome. I wouldn't call that a big success. Hardships and failures. But the key is that they remained faithful and they persevered. And this is the theme I think I'm getting from all of these people that we're learning about, is they persevered. No matter what was going on in their life, no matter what they experienced, they persevered because they wanted to remain faithful to God, and God provided them. So my question for you is, will you remain faithful? Will you persevere whatever might come your way? And are you going to listen for the Spirit and go or talk to somebody else the Spirit might be calling, because He might